Right. Um, this will be a study session, so we do not have public comment. But I do want to share our vision and mission statement. Our community inspires each student to thrive as our vision, and our mission in connection with our community. The Sequim School District empowers staff to inspire hope and provide flexible, innovative learning opportunities in a safe and respectful environment so each student thrives. I also want to acknowledge the land that we're standing on. The Sequim School District administrative and school buildings sit on the ancestral land of the S'Klallam people. With this, while the S'Klallam traditionally come from one nation, history has led to the formation of three sovereign S'Klallam tribal governments. The Lower Elwha S'Klallam tribe located in Port Angeles, the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe located in Sequim, and the Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe located in Kingston. The district's primary partnership is with the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe, and today the tribe and district share a partnership that includes official consultation on program and funding changes that may directly affect American Indian and Alaska Native students, as well as holistic service planning for students to remain successful in their educational journeys. And that will bring us to 2.01. It's the budget development update and discussion.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. And what I'd like to do this evening is have two agenda items for our study session, one being an update regarding our budget status and the development, and then secondly being our road to long-range facilities planning. So we'll go ahead and start with the budget side. Okay, so here's our agenda for this evening, and we have many slides to share, so I'm going to get through those relatively efficiently, but please stop me because this is your meeting for discussion and for us to explore different topics. So please let me know. Okay, so it's really important that we had the study session back in January so you could hear what the definition of our challenges was, so you understand what the problem is. Now tonight, what I'd like to do is take you into some more of the specifics, do a deeper dive into why this challenge exists and be able to have you ask questions. And we have Darlene with us tonight to help us talk about those things. So any questions that you need, just go ahead and ask. Okay. So of course, you know that the enrollment drop was a significant issue for us starting back in COVID times, but we continue to see that we have enrollment concerns as we move forward in the school year. That's been a historical trend in our school district. We did have in February a drop of 14, and those were at the 9th grade and 10th grade. We did have a couple of 11th and 12th graders. We've investigated all of the reasons. There are interesting reasons for those that are unique to each of those situations. But what's really important to realize is that that trend for us is something that we're going to have to get involved in, because I do think some of it is engagement and behavioral related. Some of it is that we have structures where students want to depart to finish their programs in other ways, but at least we know what level this is happening at. So we'll continue to investigate that and think of the supports that could be in place for that issue. Okay, we had reduction of ESSER that we've reviewed with you all, and that reduction of ESSER, of course, last year, we had the loss of 1.5 million coming into this year. Going into next year, we'll have the loss of $1 million that we're utilizing right now. So you can see over time, that's a significant pressure for our budget to face. We did move out to go to schools and talk to the departments and are making sure that people are aware of the problem as you were. Those visits yielded staff being able to ask any questions that they needed to. And some of you attended those sessions, so you saw the format that we used. What will be important is that we continue to have communication. For instance, this meeting right now, we will push that out so that staff are able to access this and be able to look at it as they see fit and ask any questions that they might have about the information. All right, we're going to move now into some of those specifics I told you about. one of the parts of the study session previously was using the cash flow and the projections. We now have real February financials real time. So we want to be sure we're sharing that with you. So we'll go ahead. And Darlene, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, this spreadsheet is one that you normally see when I do my budget status reports at the end of the month. But in the blue, I wanted to just kind of highlight, we always put the percentages of revenues that we've received through the month and then the percentage of expenditures. And so in blue, last year, year to date, February 2023, you can see they're fairly close. It was something that Superintendent Nickels and I talked about, like, are we right on where we should be, or are we behind? And so you can see revenues are just about where they were last year, and same with expenditures. So I wanted to at least put that in there so that you could see the percentage of what was received compared to budget is close to the same overall, like, ending percentage. So the percentages inside the different revenues and expenditures are going to be different year to year. So last year we had a lot more ESSER dollars to spend. So there was a lot bigger budget there, knowing that we would not spend all of the ESSER dollars last year. Of course, then the percentage would be, small, because we knew that there would be a percentage of that used this year as well. And that's all that this will be on the my budget stats reports at the end of this month. But I just wanted you to see just kind of where we were in February.
So let's just stop here for any questions or numbers that you're seeing there that you'd like to discuss at all.
Is there anything in particular, Regan, that you think is significant that we should be focusing on?
Well, I do recognize that when you look at the pattern of our budget expenditures, our regular instruction is exceeding the pace at which we had expected the flow to occur. And so you might ask why. And I think there are a number of reasons, but certainly we know that we have staff that we didn't budget for in August that we ended up hiring. So then you see that you're going to have a budget that's moving at a faster pace and is going to ultimately be over budget. I also would say to you that one thing I see in this that's really strong for SQUIM is that our revenue does come in so regularly from our towns and county. We're fortunate in that regard. And also the state's allocation, we will see a pop up because by April's apportionment, they will adjust to have retroactivity for the legislation that just passed. So that will be good news for us. Darlene, anything you want to add about that? Okay.
This is just a copy of the Clallam County Treasurer's Report for the general fund. And so we get this every single month for all of our funds. And then the back page will tell us a breakdown of the revenue. So our apportionment, local levy dollars, interest, if there's any state forest money, it'll all be on a back sheet. But this is really what it looks like. And the numbers reflect any cash deposits that are made at the top and any warrants that are redeemed, whether we have to take money out of investments or we have money to put into investments. And then you end up at the very bottom with your ending fund balance with the county treasurer. And that's what it is at the end of February.
So you can see there that the ending cash at $431,000 is lower than our projections this fall that we had. There's a reason for that. We've really looked deep into this. And of course, one of them is we have over expenditures from what we had budgeted. So our budget to actuals have that differential. But we also have a case where you make grant claims as the year progresses for federal monies. And those grant claims have different timetables. And so we do have some outstanding grant claims. So we have covered those expenditures with our cash fund balance, but we will be reimbursed when the grant claims come to us.
I was gonna ask a question about the minimum fund balance as our revenues ebb and flow. We have certain expenditures like salaries and so on that pay. So is that where we dip in from time to time to our minimum fund balance if we have one? To keep like salaries? We don't, I mean, it would not be not a good idea to have our salaries ebb and flow.
The only thing that really ebb and flows about our salaries, are all of the, different stipends or, extra time that is worked. So if, you know, if you end up, like right now we have a best, grant. And so we have some staff, you know, doing extra work with students. And so that would be on an extra time sheet. So there are always that stack of different things that are happening throughout each month that would make the payroll just ebb and flow a little bit. So, but it's always over $3.1 million. Like on a just a normal month, it's like 3.15 or $3.2 million.
But if we don't have revenues coming in, particularly that month, it's any deficit is, we dip into the
What
ending
happens? Yeah.
emergency fund, ending fund balance to make sure that that stays level.
Yeah, well, what happens is, you know, our apportionment doesn't come in equal payments, so our apportionment, so like for, you know, our apportionment might be $3.5 million, which it
Mhm.
was. But then our payroll is almost $3.2 million, and then we still have all of our accounts payable to do.
Mhm.
And, you know, our utilities are in that, and, you know, all those things that we have to pay every single month, so that's where so if you don't have enough enough grants out there, hopefully some of those grants are paying for our personnel.
Mhm.
And we do have some of those.
But that's one of the functions of that fund balance that we try to maintain 4 to 6%.
That's
Is
correct.
if we have a decline in a delay, whatever you want to call it, in revenue,
That's right.
for whatever reason, we dip into those funds to pay our bills or what.
Right.
So when we're down this low, hopefully we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room there.
Yeah, there's another slide, and it's just a fix to a slide that we had in January, because we have
Mhm.
more information. And so then you'll see just a little bit, you know, different ending fund balance, just because we were able to get February and then go back and look a year in the past to see what kind of local levy dollars came in March. You know, look at our cash deposits that we have right now that are going in March. The extra funding that may come through in March or April. So those things are all starting to now come into play. And I know March payroll, there isn't anything that is extraordinary, or so it should be close to the $3.2 million. And our grant claims will hopefully keep our apportionment up around $3.5 million like it was in February, because I think February and March are both at 9% for apportionment revenue.
And do we make efforts to replenish this ending fund balance?
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out is that we're pulling down some significant grant money. Okay, and if we get the CTE $5 million grant signed by the governor this month, we have CTE grants significantly. We just applied for a recreational grant for the tennis courts, for instance. We're looking at several other grants for more SEL or instructional based things. This $431,000 is not going to give us the cyclic movement we need to be able to cover the reimbursements unless we are very strategic in how we expend, pay those bills, and then make sure the cycle is 30 days. so that we are paid back. So that's why it's going to also be essential that we really work on that fund balance development going into next year. It's not going to be about just being above zero. We have to have that cash flow available.
I have a question about grants. One of the things that is just wonderful when you send your communications out to the team about grants that the district is getting and working hard to get, et cetera, and that's really great. But I wonder about what percentage of our, I don't know if they're even in the revenue category, but would be from grants, and how much extra labor goes into having to reach out for these grants all the time to sustainably finance our district.
Well, we aren't sustainably financing the district with grant money at all. I will say that title grants from the federal government, those are assigned to you as a school district. So there isn't significant work in pulling it down. You do have to report though on your activity and make sure those reports are issued. As far as the grants that we've received for CTE, for instance, and for this recreational improvement grant, I'd say it's hours of writing and revision, but you also have to look at what you get back in return. And I think the payoff has been significant. So I would say it's well spent time. What I will also say is that we're looking at ways to be able to collect resources to become the best and most efficient grant writers. And there are many trainings out there. The use of AI to be able to collect information that is relevant to the grant topics is very helpful too. And I think it's definitely worth the pursuit. What's great about one-time use grants, like CTE building a building or resurfacing a tennis court, is that you don't bring that into your general fund, you're expending that through a capital fund. So we're relegating that money to a different stream.
Thank you.
But we still need the cash flow in order to be able to functionally pay each month. All right, we have a lot of slides, so we're going to keep going. Okay. Speaking of cash flow. Okay, so this was the graph that you saw earlier this year, but we have updated it for the projection, and I'll let Darlene speak to it. But Larry, I think this speaks to your point about the different degrees of apportionment coming in. It is not a static line. It is peaks and valleys.
Yeah, correct. What we did was we put in correct February numbers because it was just a projection when we first did this in January. And then I went back and did a little bit of research to see what kind of local levy dollars came in and just kind of a trend. Oh, sorry, a trend. It sounds funny to me because I have my hearing aids, so it sounds really loud. And then we just did a trend along so that you could see, I think probably what would be the least amount for an ending fund balance in August. And because of course we don't know, I don't know what all is going to come in for apportionment and some of those things. And this was just we know some of the levy dollars and just trending that way. So we just updated it a little bit.
So let me talk about January. January is the true up month. So we received apportionment in September to December based on the budgeted enrollment we had put into our state forms. In January, it trues up. So we start receiving the pullback because our enrollment target wasn't met. So that's part of the impact here. But you'll see that we will be having an April apportionment that will bring our fund balance back up. But when you look at that kind of peach colored line and down, probably we're ending at $1 million, which is not meeting our target. Okay, any questions about that? And we're going to keep doing this every single month so you can see actuals. All right. Okay, so this is the projection for next year if we do nothing. And so just want to bring this back to you so that you can understand the figure of 2.3 million that I would like to share with you as our necessary reduction in expenditure in order to meet our 4% target. Where that number comes from is that you'll see in August, we're projected to be in 2025 at a negative 300,000. You'll see 290 there. So we would have to make that up, and then we need to get back up to the green line because that is a 4% fund balance by policy.
Is this with the updated budget that was just passed?
The
Yeah,
legislative,
legislative
no,
budget, okay.
this does
So
not.
based
Now,
on the old numbers.
let me tell you about that, just quickly on the side. The staffing mix shifts, we applied them in the calculator that was just released for us to utilize. It looks like $100,000. Okay, that's good news, positive news, but it's a drop in the bucket as well. So we're going to just keep collecting all of those drops though, and make something from it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Darlene, on this?
The calculator just came out from the ESD. So the fiscal director there made it. And so what we did was we put in our regionalization and then enrollment for elementary, middle school and high school as if it were coming in through apportionment, because sixth grade comes in as elementary. And then we have to do the work to change it to middle school. Once we put all that in, and then you put in your CTE, FTE, and we have CTE, FTE at both middle school and high school, and then that reduces it a little bit. So with this calculator that the ESD gave us, that's what it looks like. $100,000.
Okay, now we'll talk about expenditures. So you've seen this slide before. We continue to just want to recognize the deficits that are occurring real time as we move through the year. These, of course, are all projected, but they're projected to actuals. We know what we're encumbering for people's salaries, and we understand exactly who we have hired at this point. And so we still have the deficit because our levy right now this year is just a bit over 7.5 million. Okay. So this is a summary of the prototypical staffing model. So it's just important to make it clear that the way that our apportionment comes in is based on a prototypical model that does not have a relationship to SQUIM school district's needs. It does have a relationship to the number of students that we have and how the model is therefore applied to us. Okay, so when you see these different aspects, it's very challenging for us to be able to run a school based on the numbers that are delivered through apportionment. But apportionment is a funding model. It's not a staffing model. So it does not tell the school district what a school district must do for having people in positions. It just tells you how much money you have to make the decisions that you do. This is a page that's very, very small, but it's what we see in apportionment. It's how these calculated amounts come in. And one thing I would want to share with you all is that I've heard a number of times that people inquire in school districts about, well, how many staffing are we allocated? And the answer is, you're not being allocated anyone. You're allocated a fund, an amount to run a certain aspect of the school, but it doesn't have to be dedicated to that aspect unless it is a categorical fund that must be spent in a particular way. And one of those aspects I would say to you is special education. We have to make sure that money is spent there. CTE. The numbers are so small compared to what really takes for us to facilitate. So no wonder school districts across the land have staffing much more than the model allows. But this model has not kept pace with what people are being paid for their positions.
Just-
I'll stop here, yeah.
Is this the basic problem all across the state?
Correct.
I mean, you said, we don't get enough money. Does anybody in the state? I mean, the 295 districts, are there districts out there that are right-sized and are getting just the right amount of money?
I would say absolutely not. However, I do not know the status of every district, and I don't know if we have districts that are operating without levies. I have not heard of one, but
I know we have some really tiny districts and they're kind of in a whole different world, I would imagine financially.
they receive small school funding for certain aspects, but I have spoken to at least 3 small school superintendents, and they feel that they're stretched incredibly thin and they don't have the adequate resources. But so be it. It's our problem to solve.
Mm.
And so we've got to tackle it and just recognize why we're here. Okay, so our current levy, I'm going to just show you a sheet real quick. A moment, please. When the levy was put to the voters back in 2021, this was the color of the graph.
And what are the,
And the different categories were facility and school maintenance at 38%, student support at 41%, technology at 1.8, transportation at 0.38, extracurricular athletic activities at 9.9, and then district support at 8.4. The shift that we have had to make just to operate and how levy is being used is very much challenged. And this is also the same across district after district that I am aware of or read about. So I would like to stop here and say it is essential that our next levy that is for learning, that we find a way to help people understand how this support is basic to our function and our ability to provide strong programming and extracurricular to students. I'm happy to say that in our spending freeze that we're focused on right now, we are trying as hard as we can to avoid having students feel that pinch and are still continuing to facilitate their extracurricular programming.
When we get to the committees that are looking at the EP&O and how we're going to arrange it, I don't know if there's creative ways creative and legal at the same time to help buffer unexpected circumstances like we ended up having. I mean, we didn't expect some of the price increases to increase the way they have, things like that. And I know we're pretty much, EP&O levy is pretty fixed. If I'm right, it comes in at a certain amount regardless of
That's
what's going,
true.
and it stays that way for 4 years and we can't change it till then. So I don't know what the creative ways to plan for that are, but somewhere the discussion ought to be made, well, how much do we actually ask for?
Okay, well,
If we have to give back money at the end, that'd be great, but
well, let me talk to you about this. Our school district has engaged with DA Davidson for planning regarding the next levy and potentially capital levy or bond effort. And we have talked about the structure that we're currently under for the levy. And actually, our levy structure right now is pretty successful. I believe we're about 6% below where we could be maxed. That's not bad considering everything that has transpired in the past 4 years. Remember that we are under a situation where we can ask for $2,500 per student that is escalated for CPI over the 4 years. So we would want to do that structure again, most likely, but we will have an advisory group that comes together to discuss what structure of a levy is being recommended to us and then what the board has as an interest to move forward. All right, segregated spending. I just want to reemphasize again that we have particular expenditures that will occur regardless of the challenges of the general fund, because they are in separated funds. And so we will be introduced to new school buses next week. Those are a transportation vehicle fund. We're going to have the capital projects continue down the road, capital projects funds. When we do receive, I'm optimistic about the CTE center, that'll be a capital fund expenditure for that building. The grants that are coming in and categorical funds, we're already managing that way as it is, but we definitely want to be looking at cash flow to make sure that we've got the adequate coverage. Okay, this was a slide that Darlene worked on so that you could see some comparisons of how we are having over expenditure. And we did this in 3 years so that you can see a pattern. All right. And I'll let Darlene speak to it.
So what I did was I took both certificated and classified salary and benefits. That was an easy report for 22-23 because we already had our totals and as well as our expenditures. And then in 23-24, which we're in right now, I used our apportionment and just opened it up and pulled out each of the classifications, leaving behind categorical. There's no special ed in this. There's no CTE in this. There's no LAP or title. The people that are funded out of those different categorical pieces are not included in this. And then just use the encumbered amount that's left in there for the remainder of the year for salary and benefit to come up with that. And then the 24-25 revenues and expenditures are based on what we are using at this moment for enrollment numbers. And then the F203 does the calculation of what we receive for funding for basic education. And then we already have HR and payroll. They've put together the salary and benefit portion for 24-25 as it is right now. So everyone has been rolled up on the salary schedules and everything's been applied as if we're doing nothing right now. So this is what it would look like.
So why I think this is important is that you see that this effect that we are challenged with right now actually has been occurring in our past. And if we had gone back 2 more years, you would also see this impact of overage of expenditure. And remember, our levy for this year is 7.5 million. Next year, it's 7.7 million. This number right here of being over doesn't include our special ed expenditure. And if we went back to that slide where we had all of the deficits listed, once you start looking at those, you'll see that it is absolutely maxing out our levy and going over. And so that's why we've ended up with this deficit of using the fund balance. We've just got to correct this pattern. It can't exist anymore. So I want to talk about a financial regimen. Okay, so we're not using the word remedy tonight because a remedy is communicating that we've solved it. Right now, we're on a regimen to get to a place where we have stability and we have projections that are showing us favorable financials for cash flow. So we have implemented spending. We're calling it a freeze. but it does have caveats to it. And so that means that we are still letting field trips head out that have been pre-approved. We are looking for grant money to be able to fund things that could get students the opportunities and advantages that we want to. We want to be able to say, we had some pre-planned PD, for instance, in a couple instances, we're still going to facilitate that. But we have pulled back the reins on discretionary spending. And that seems to have slowed down our accounts payable. So we feel favorable about that effect right now. Is it going to be substantial? I need to be real with you. An accounts payable run for the rest of a school year is not significant compared to personnel costs. Hiring frost or freeze. We are not hiring new employees. If we do have somebody who resigns and it's immediate, say, and we need to fulfill that position, we're going to evaluate it. And we've had to do that already this year. We've made some decisions since January on not filling at least one position. We also recognize that we have some places where people would appreciate additional support and it just can't happen. We also are looking at long-term subs that are less expensive than hiring somebody to be a long-term employee for stopgap needs, because we do have students who need support in that way. Reduction in force scenarios. I've been asked about this multiple times as I visit each of the schools and departments. And my answer is, we are going to wait. We have an incentive in place that I will talk to you about, and we'd like to see the results of that before we make decisions about reductions of personnel. And it would be our interest to say that we don't want to reduce personnel if we don't have to. And if attrition is going to be that significant in our district that we can avoid that, we will. So we're waiting. Okay. Adjustments to bargaining agreements. We are starting to prepare ideas that we would be able to take to associations to propose. I would say to you, we're also waiting, because if the attrition is significant enough, it might change what we're asking for there to be consideration of. But the reason why consideration of bargaining agreements is important is because those costs and CBAs continue on. Even if we control for something this year, we have agreements that go on for years at a time. So we need to make sure that we're looking ahead and projecting on what those costs could be. Any questions about these aspects? Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and roll into survey data about the budget. So the survey we put out to the community had 3 parts, as you remember: late start and busing, and then we had budget questions, and then we had questions about technology. So we're going to tackle the budget side questions. All right, same format we did last time. Okay, so we posed questions to the community about their ideas on reductions that could work. And so this question was, reduce the number of district office administrators and district office staff. And you see that there are folks across the spectrum. What we also are doing is going through and looking at all of the comments to try to pull out any trends we can find, because we know that people answer for certain reasons and they could be very different from each other. Okay, okay, next. Okay. Okay, reduce the number of building administrators, principal, assistant principals. We certainly see a shift in this graph where we have more disagreement with that. And I think that certainly aligns with what I've heard of support for needing that leadership at the school, and also disciplinary and behavior support. It's been critical this year. Okay, reduce the number of support services staff. And again, we have significant disagreement with that. Classified staff are often in positions of paraeducators that are helping students in small groups or one-on-one. They manage so many systems in the mornings. crossing guard duty, we have bus areas, we have lunch and cafeteria management. There's just a lot of important functions that people can't imagine not having folks to do that. However, I need to talk about this with you. If we go back to that prototypical model, the funding for classified staff is so low that we also need to recognize what proportion of hiring we've done in comparison to the ability to pay for it. So this is one area where we have such high support and need for these services and such low recognition in the formula, but we did get some improvement by that staff mix. That's good news. Okay. Reduce the number of teachers on special assignments, instructional coaches, program specialists. I'll say in SQUIM, we do not have many of these. Okay, in some school districts, they have what they call TOSAs, teachers on special assignments, and they're quite plentiful. In SQUIM School District, we don't at all. We're quite limited. So the people that we do have are really, they're serving very specialized functions. So it's evident here that people value this and really would like to see those stay. Okay, reduce the number of teachers and certificated staff. I think this speaks for itself.
Not surprising.
Important function, essential to us, right? Okay, increasing class size as an option. Not popular. Implement a pay freeze, furlough, or a pay cut. Reduce building budgets and office supplies. Got a little movement there.
It's not going to give us what we need though, unfortunately.
Reduce purchasing of curriculum. And this is one area where we've recognized that we were moving forward. And those of you on Education Committee, you've heard about the science curriculum. We've paused it. Okay. And it's not because we don't need a new science curriculum. It's because we recognize that we don't have the funds right now as a guarantee. If we do in the future with how we prioritize, great, we'll push start. But we've had to make some serious decisions this spring. Okay, technology purchase.
I have a question about the format of this. Did you consider having people rank, like rather than be asked, because they could literally say about all of these things, they want us to keep all of them.
I think
But-
that is the outcome.
Yeah, but if they were compelled to rank them, like what would you most or least like out of, you know what I mean, top one, the first one the one that would be most likely to be cut, or that you would, if you had to choose.
We did
Because
receive.
that's what we have to do, right? We have to look at that and essentially rank.
We did receive feedback in our survey from a few different places about ways that the survey could have been done in a different manner. So we've recorded all of that and we've thought about that for the future of how it could be more effective. So yes. And then secondly, I would say to you that the theme is that people very much value what we do and what we have right now and don't want to see it go. And that obviously is a good thing because that means we've been doing a lot of things that are so good and right. But secondly, it means the tough decisions are going to have to be made with leadership to make them and making sure that we're being thoughtful. And I don't think any of us would shirk that duty, but I think we will be working on ranking. And so we actually are starting, I'll tell you about that in a minute, the meetings that we need to around that. I do want to speak about professional development. This slide has a more of the balanced answer to it. There are requirements for professional development. There are certain specific expectations from the state that our school district has to facilitate. Number one, we have certain requirements that certain positions need in order to hold their positions and facilitate those well. And so while some people obviously feel as though there's reduced value in those and we should look, and we're going to, I also would say there are other places where it's not a negotiable if you want to run a system that is meeting requirements. This is an action right now. We are looking with the new routing system that's been loaded. We're doing final tweaks with that system, and I'd really love to give a shout out to Kevin up at Transportation. He's doing an excellent job getting this system underway for us and starting to create the routings and condensing routes as best we can. What he's doing is working on condensing. They look at those routes and will evaluate the times, the efficiencies, and then we'll bring some suggestions to the table regarding that. Facilities rentals. We do have a fee schedule, and it hasn't been significantly modified in years. And I will say that as it stands right now, there are fees that are collected. There are certain entities who have had agreements with the district in the past about how they might give in-kind donations or how their billing may work. But we're really working now to get this much more consistent, and we need to look at the rates, because when you are hiring custodial help to come in on some of these events, that escalates every year with the increased cost. Okay. And then we have things like insurance. We have to cover overhead of the actual facility. And oftentimes our school district is the only facility in town to facilitate the activity. When you talk about gyms, you think about our auditorium, there aren't a lot of options. So we get significant use of our facilities, and we want to support, but it costs us to do that business too. So we'll have to pass these along. So that concludes that portion. What I would say is that there were many comments about superintendent salary, very concerned about the level of that. And I would just like to speak to it and say our school district and our state pays educators very well. We have strong salaries in Western Washington, but I do believe that it is important for us to be looking at every degree of pay, and the leaders no exception. So that has been received and noted for sure. I also will say that we have, in studying superintendent pay across Western Washington, we are in a competitive situation where it is a strong pay band, but it is not out of line with other districts and what they're paying. It's just that we do have different structures to contracts. So that's something that you should feel that we'll be talking about, of course, as things move forward. Also recognize that it's important that students not feel the pinch of things in their programming. And what's important around that comment is that people want students to have access to opportunities and classes and programs, but we're going to have to look at the structure of the way we do that. And so I have asked principals to be looking at schedules, because schedule is the package in which you deliver the programming. And sometimes when we move schedules, we can end up having a both and that is a goal for us. I also would say that we saw significant comments around why are you asking? You're just going to do what you want anyway. I'd like to just speak to that. We're asking because we're interested in prioritizing. And it's difficult to prioritize when you either A, don't have an idea, or you think you have an idea and you want to verify it. I will tell you from these results, I feel like it's been verified that people like the programming their students are receiving. We had over 400 students take the survey. They want to retain those programs. So it's going to take communication about why we have to change, because we are going to have to condense things. Okay, timeline for where we go from here. Do you want to speak to this?
So this timeline has just been updated from year to year, and usually start in December, January, and start building budget, the salary and benefit side, and then the fiscal side as well. And then they're merged, and then we start coming to the board to let you know what's happening, and also talking to administrators. So you can see that in the first few months, and we're doing all those things and through March. And then you start getting into April and looking at board meetings and doing all the things that we need to do to meet the deadline of May 15th, and make sure that the budgets are built so that I can bring them to the fiscal side. And then there's all the requirements for how we put the notice out to the public that we're going to adopt a budget. And we'll put that timeline in real dates when we have a calendar for July and August. But it's required that our budget is adopted by August 31st each year. So we usually I present it the first meeting in August, and that's an opportunity for if any changes need to be made, then there's still the second meeting in August, unless there's a special meeting. So it's just a heads up, and then we're getting closer, time's moving quickly, so.
So this is our last slide around budget. So I'd just like to turn it over to you, and we can talk about anything budget before we move on. And
When do we have to announce if there's going to be any reduction in force? I know and you said you had offered out an incentive for people to let you know if they're planning to retire. When are you
I'm sorry.
expecting to hear back from that?
okay, so an incentive was released to staff, and March 29th
Okay.
is the notification date. That's
Mhm.
right before spring break.
Mhm.
Okay, we will come back from spring break. We will have those numbers, and we will start evaluating the attrition levels.
Mhm.
And it's important not just that you receive attrition numbers, it's also where the attrition occurs.
Right.
So we'll need to be really analyzing that
Mhm.
and then making decisions. Notification for certificated reduction of force would have to occur by May 15th.
May 15th?
That incentive still be open after spring break? For telling you if they're planning on leaving?
No,
Okay, I could see somebody going on vacation and going, I could do this year round. I just wondered.
Mhm.
No, I think that's fine.
So I guess just my sort of the meta question is what's happening between now and in the next couple of months? I mean, it sounds like what we're looking at is, a shortfall of $1 million.
2.3 million.
2 to 3 million.
Well, a shortfall
Mhm.
of, you saw that we were $1 million coming out of the end of this
Right.
year. We should be at 2.3 million, so it's 1.3 million as a shortfall.
Right.
But we need an additional million to make sure we can
Right.
cover next year.
Right. So I mean, I assume you're not just waiting until you hear on March 29th, about that, we're having to start making plans and having to start making contingency you know, having discussions about where is this money gonna come from? And I'm just wondering what do those discussions look like? Or, you know, for example, at the high school, you know, a lot of people said they don't want any programs. People don't want programs cut. But,
So
you know, I mean, you have to look at, okay, how many kids are enrolling in this class or that class and how,
Well,
you know.
I'll explain to you. We are having individualized meetings with administrators.
Mhm.
And what we've already done is talk to each of them about their staffing. So
Mhm.
we are going through staffing with a fine tooth comb,
Mhm.
making sure that we have exactly the correct number of staffing FTE at each building in the right place, in the right funding line.
Mhm.
Have we dedicated everything to the right grant funding, if that's applicable or categorical? Then we're looking at, because you've been facilitating a schedule in a certain way for a certain amount of time, does not mean that's the only way
Right.
that the school can be facilitated.
Mhm.
You bring up course selection.
Mhm.
There are courses that have been taught for a very long time. There may need to be discussion about how course selection shifts
Mhm.
because we need to cover differently.
Right.
So those are the discussions that we are starting.
Mhm.
We're giving principals a chance to have an initial meeting and then go back and consider factors that we present to them.
Mhm.
And then we're looking at targeting. And the reason I say targeting is we are taking all of the apportionment, that prototypical model language,
Mhm.
putting it on a piece of paper for a principal to look at about their own building
Mhm.
and study their own revenue to actuals.
Mhm.
Okay, so that all is very detailed work and
Mhm.
we're working with each, not only principal, but department.
Mhm.
So that's what's happening.
Okay.
Mhm.
So when we see a draft of the budget, will we also see therefore where exactly the cuts have been made so we know what's been impacted?
When you see the budget, you wouldn't see the reductions, but we would, of course, put in reduction information in a slide so you're aware of where that is. Mhm.
When do you think you might open discussions with the unions about any contract renegotiation?
I want to be fair to look at the attrition levels, so
Mhm.
it'd be after spring break when we've seen what the outcome of that is.
Okay.
Because we want to maximize the attrition so that we can have conversations about what really is projected to
Right.
occur.
I'm not looking at so much as our budget cuts, you know, and the sky is falling, is we need to right size our district so that this is sustainable every year. And so that not every year we're coming in or going, okay, well, how much do we have this year? We know about what it's going to be. And I think we just got to right size it, get it so that we're not having to make these decisions every single year on where we cut. You know, we have to have a sustainable model. And I think that's what we're looking at. I think when we get those attrition numbers, that'll give us a better idea of how to right size our district for a sustainable future, not just next year's
Mhm.
budget.
Mhm.
You know, because that's the frustration. I think even the community members, like you had mentioned in your slides,
Mhm.
why is it we're always talking about budget, skies falling? I think it's because we maybe in the past haven't done the best job of that sustainable model. So I'm excited of just having a model so we don't have to go through this every year.
And partly it's not just models, but having a projection algorithm that actually works so that we have projections that pan out, right?
Correct. We're working diligently around projection models, and you can see us, you know, we're starting with the graphing of things, but we're also looking at the legislation that's come through and just piping that through into a second year, and then we'll start going into a third year, but we're not there yet.
So, few things that I, want to mention. One, I definitely appreciate, you were talking about just being very careful to look at attrition. Because, of course, we want to consider the impact to the staff that we employ, and if there's ways we can make adjustments and be flexible, I just appreciate that.
Mhm.
I know that, and it sounds like we're already starting to look at some of the, some where we know there's going to be some improvements. I think you had mentioned the staff mix, and I think some of the others that could positively affect us as well are gonna be, there was a slight increase to the special education funding model, and we're over that threshold. And there's also an increase to what the prototypical model funds for education support professionals as well, I believe, that I would imagine that we would benefit from. And then MSOC too got an increase as well.
Yes, it
So
did.
there's a, I don't know, I mean,
Modest.
so I think it's be fair when we figure out what the totals on all these, it will not total up to be 2.3 million
No,
by any means. That's
Yeah,
just,
but it's a drop in the bucket being added to another drop in the bucket.
yeah,
And that is a strategy too. And we're not going to look away from that. So we take attrition plus these smaller amounts that are coming. We're going to look at the actuals. We're going to be conservative about enrollment because we really did try to be ambitious this year. It did not prove to be something that has worked well. Now, on the flip side, we need to think about revenue generation. And so the grants that are generated for revenue need to be in the right columns. So we can do all the one-time projects we want, but we need sustainable money, and that's generally not grant funding. We can think, though, about growing our enrollment as our sustainable revenue generation. So we're talking about that too.
yeah. I was just gonna, oh, sorry, the last
Oh,
point. I
Well,
was
you
just gonna-
mentioned the MSOCs and which is the material supplies, operational costs. And prototypical model, there is a little bit of money for this year budget. I don't have the magical ESD OSPI calculators, but it probably won't be a lot of money, but it'll be something.
Yep.
We won't have to wait till next year, but I understand MSOCs next year is gonna be like 2% or something, not much for the 24-25. So, and special ed, I don't know what the future would be. 16% may be capped for a while. So we can't expect more increases after that. But I do like the idea, we need to really, I think, focus on what can we do to increase enrollment. And I think a good step is finding out why those students are leaving. There may be nothing we can do, especially the older kids. They have very specialized reasons for leaving that we may not be able to offer anything that will satisfy those needs. But at the lower grade levels, we need to take a look at that. And I mean,
Our lower
budget
grade
is-
levels are very stable.
Yeah, our budget is based on how many kids we have in the classroom, so.
We are studying that, and we actually have had students who have returned. So we have students who, in some cases, have situations
Yeah.
where they depart for a bit and come back.
Find out why.
But
why
if
did
you,
come
the
back?
problem is, if you depart and you happen to be gone on count day,
You're not
it's
here,
too bad.
even if you come back
for
the
the
next
district.
day.
That's right.
Also, I was thinking, what's going on in the athletic world with pro football in particular, restructuring contracts. There's all kinds of money changing going on. What's going on at the NC2A level, especially in men's football, basketball, the NIL, which is the name, image, and likeness contract that these players get X amount of dollars. And I mean, there's a whole shift going on compensation going on in the country. I don't know how much it applies to us and what we're going through, but I know that we're not the only district that's having to look at incentives to keep people on and coming up with good rationale for having to let people go without affecting programs. So whatever's out there, whatever interesting, innovative things other people are doing, I think hopefully we can tag on and see what are other school districts doing. The ones that make the newspaper are pretty draconian often. They're going to cut music, that sort of thing. And we don't want to do that, but there's got to be innovative ways of doing this where we can right size, get our budget in line and maintain and increase student success and achievement at the same time.
The other piece I was gonna share about, on that note of increasing enrollment, I think, one of the things we do have, if there's folks that are doing homeschool type of activities, if they were, where that enrollment has gone since, we saw that very first graph. And I think providing, as many, even, they may not always look like a traditional path, but providing options for students might be, something, and I know we currently do, and we have different programs, we have OPA, we have DVS, but how we can further expand on that, it's hard for me to not consider my other job, where I am a teacher at a virtual academy, and I serve students outside of the district, right? And so I know that potentially is something to look at, where we can recoup some enrollment. And of course, you all know I'm not gonna not say this plug, but I'm just gonna throw it out there again. The transitional kindergarten, those kids count as enrollment that are funded. So potentially, I mean, where there's 5-year-olds in a community, there are 4-year-olds in a community. So I'm just, still kind of putting a plug in for that. I just think may or may not be feasible in the immediate, but that is enrollment, which means funding. So if we don't have enough kindergarten teachers, maybe we have enough 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds to cover it all. Or if we have too many kindergarten teachers, for example, maybe we can, recoup some there. So putting it out there.
On the other end of it too, I wonder now, Running Start kids, we can't count them, right? And does the state funding follow them over to Running Start? So, because that's a high school group. And so is that a group that's expanding or?
It's stable.
Yeah.
It's a stable group. And the enrollment is counted, but the amount of money is passed through to
Right.
the college. And we do retain a very slight
It's like
percentage.
15% or something, or 10%.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What percentage do we retain for Running Start? Yeah, not very much at all.
Just like an admin fee, kind of
Mhm.
almost, yeah.
But back to your point, I just wanted to say that we do have many homeschoolers who actually do attend just for one period. So they might come in to take an art class, or they might come in to involve themselves in PE, or they might take a science class. And so we would love to promote that our school doors are open to folks who would like to be able to get in and experience just a course of study, or have an experience even just in a school. So that's an option as well, and we'll keep growing that.
Do we get funding for that?
For the portion of time in which those students attend. All right,
I
okay.
think we can offer, here's what we have to offer. Please consider, but are there still laws to prohibit, limit, we can't go out and recruit homeschool students,
That's correct. That's correct.
but we can
We can't
show them what
advertise.
we have available here. Like it's hard. It's difficult for a homeschool student to do a chemistry lab,
That's right.
usually. Depends on what their situation is.
Mhm.
And I do know we have quite a few well, I shouldn't say quite a few. I don't know how many homeschool kids that participate in our activities and sports.
Mm,
And I
many.
think that's a great move. Back in the day when I was teaching, if you went homeschool, you weren't allowed to do anything with public school at all. So I celebrate the fact that we have grown up a little bit, and we allow them to take a class here and there, join a sport, join the band, that sort of thing. I think
Mhm,
that's
we
great.
sure do.
Have we considered, this is probably not something that could be looked at the or harder to look at the elementary level, but I think I've mentioned it to you before. I mentioned it here before, but secondary potentially, like if there's, and of course, at an optional basis, if maybe there are folks that are at a point in their career where they want to work less than 1.0 to do some optional reductions there if it fits. Is that something we're potentially considering as well?
We haven't formally
Okay.
issued that, as I think that if there's somebody who might have that idea, they should speak to their administrator to see, because we do have some staff who do work less than a 1.0 FTE. And we are facilitating those types of schedules. So there is job sharing, of course. So if you have someone that you would like to partner with to offset, that's one angle. But secondary, I think that's sometimes a manageable situation, sometimes not.
Of course, none of these are the one size fits all
No,
solution
but
by any
it's-
means, but if there's,
And I feel, why wouldn't we talk about anything
Sure.
once? Right?
Mhm.
Okay, we're gonna flip gears because your time's valuable and we've been here about an hour. So we're gonna start talking about our long-range facilities planning. This is much shorter piece, and ask any questions you like. I just want you to know where we are in this. At the last board meeting or two, the board has expressed that they would like to move forward toward our levy, whether it be a capital levy or a bond in the future, along with our EP&O levy for learning. But it is a journey that we need to start now for a number of reasons. Okay, so I just want to bring you back. So there have been historical attempts at a bond, and those happened on these dates. We have not passed a bond since 1996. That's been 28 years. We did have interest in there being a bond, and a couple of the ideas that were related to that bond were Helen Haller Elementary School, and then also looking at some of the high school needs. But our middle school in the H building certainly were the last bond projects that we had. So we have put out applications for long-range facilities planning group. We do have 7 returns on that and 1 student on the list. So I'm very excited about that. We do have this open until Friday, and I know anywhere I've gone in the community, this has been mentioned. And just as of yesterday, for instance, in a group I was meeting with, there was interest expressed. So I'm hoping that we get a good number of people. We will need 2 board members to be sitting on this committee. And I will be sitting on it, and Director Mike Sanos will be running the group. So we'll look forward to the education that will come along with this group, because it's going to be educating this group on the intricacies of levies and bonds and some school funding. And then also making sure they understand the process we have to go through if we were to get a capital project levy or a bond, and how you facilitate use of the money too. One of the first steps we also have to take is a building conditions assessment. This type of assessment, depending on the year of the building being erected, depends on what is expected for a building conditions assessment. So think how old some of our buildings are. We have several buildings that are exempted, but we still need to have them assessed because we don't know what we have inside of these buildings in some cases. And I want to give you an example. In the current capital projects levy, there is mention of science lab classroom improvements. So we have, Mike Sanos and I have met with the science teachers about their desires, and they've given us a wonderful list of things. And we've had to turn around and meet with them and say, some of these things cannot be facilitated because of the building itself. There is no renovating that. So we've decided on what we think we can move forward with for improvements, But we recognize a bond would be necessary in order to do some type of rebuild in order to make those other wishes come true. So we're really going to have to look at all levels of the building conditions assessment. We will receive a small grant from OSPI to do this. They had initially projected, they thought it'd be about $28,000 that we would be able to receive. In the last day or two, we've received an email that it's probably more in the line of 12,000. So we're having a meeting with OSPI to understand how we can get that 28,000 because we need it. And I also have come to learn in my discussions with the demographers, OSPI actually has one population census document that they use to project what school funding match. And they would like us not to call it a match, supplement we will receive, because it's not a match. It's related to many, many factors. But since they are only using this one document, anything that we go and find out about our population census will be good information for us, but it won't be considered in determining these formulas. So I hope that we learn some things that we can help to advocate next year, a day on the Hill, about how that formula might need to change.
Well, and we might want to talk to the candidates for OSPI State Superintendent to let them know, if we get a chance, to also let them know our concerns. I mean,
Yes.
I know that they're limited by legislation as well, but if they know that this demographic situation is not meeting our needs, maybe there's something they could promote from their end as well.
We have introduced that to the regional coordinator that we're working with.
Okay, good.
So he's heard from us on that. Okay, so this is the OSPI page that we utilize to get our tools. We are working directly with the regional coordinator, so he meets with us in webinar format, and he speaks to us specifically about SQUIM school districts particulars. So it's been very helpful. He's an excellent representative for them. But this alone will take months to complete. So now that we've received the amount of grant, we're going to talk to them about clarifying that, and then we will apply for D1. D1 is the first form in a list of about 11 forms that you go through in order to secure a bond. And so we'll be ready with that first and second stage.
And if I'm at some point, I'm assuming this is be discussed, because all districts, I think, are discussing it, but my understanding is, although not enough, I would say, but there was a significant increase to the portion of even if we're not calling it match, but the per square footage dollar amount that I know is still formula driven to some degree, but that did increase by a significant-
$104,
Yeah.
$104 per square foot increase, and it's called the SCAP formula, School Construction Assistance Program.
Mhm.
And there will also be some tweaks to the formula itself, which will help us to gain square footage that we might be authorized to build for. We couldn't have asked for better timing to be considering a potential bond, because we did see that increase in the formula. So we're going to continue to work and just be ready for the Long Range Facilities Advisory Group to have all the information that they need to make a recommendation to you.
Right.
Okay. There may also be a strategy where we may get to a place where we recognize that our building conditions assessment does not give us enough information, and we have to go deeper, and we might want to consider that a capital projects levy for 2 years gets us prepared for an ensuing bond at a later time. There are different structures for us to consider, but I think we have to just be real that in order to do what we're going to have to do to keep us up to date, a bond is in the future.
It's my understanding on that SCAP money,
Mhm.
we would only be eligible for that if we passed a bond.
Correct. That's right.
So if we don't pass the bond, it's not like they're gonna give us the money
No.
anyway. it's money left on the table that we don't have access to.
Yes, exactly.
And I think I'm glad you mentioned that about the timing being right, because I think it's important that it gets communicated and the public is aware, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, because there's a cost to our community. But it's there that we're timing this, and it's so that the community isn't bearing that whole cost, right? There's a
Right.
huge, big chunk, maybe not enough, but a big chunk of that portion that's being carried based on this adjustment. So we're also being fiscal stewards in a sense, where we're being good strategy as to how to maximize the opportunities that the state is providing to not always match, but to give additional funding, so that's relief on our community. So.
And then there is a discussion in its infancy, so I don't want to overstate it, but there is this discussion burgeoning about having modular-based school construction. And if that does take flight, that could be an efficient way for school districts to consider different ways that they bring their campuses together, new with older buildings. So that's something we're going to be paying attention to. And Representative Theringer is very strong in that discussion, so we'll want to keep in touch with him. So as I said, we're going to have a considerable education element for the Long Range Facilities Advisory Group, making sure they have all their information of content knowledge about this so that they can make strong recommendations once they do receive the assessments from the buildings. But that will take a while to get that complete.
When will that group start?
We're hoping to start in April. So we're looking at the applications as they come in. We'll make sure everyone knows who's selected to serve on the committee, and then we'll be moving forward in April.
One thing I noticed is with the failed budgets, that screen that we went through, I saw an outlier there, $150 million ask, it seemed, and then the rest were all around 50.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea, was that due to polling and data that seems like a drastic change in 1 year from 150 million to 50 million? Do we know the data yet? Or maybe we haven't looked into it yet, because that's old. I mean, it's way back in 14.
Well, there are people in the room who do know this.
Oh, you were-
Tracy's saying, do you know? You know?
Anybody know?
It was a new elementary school, athletic fields, moving the band room, kind of creating a whole new auditorium for band and
Wow.
So it's
then all of the improvements that we have been doing. So the new elementary school was a big part of it.
okay.
Was that actually put to the voters? It's just interesting because that one just says proposal for 154 and then the other,
Oh, it
they were all put to the voters?
that one, if I remember right, almost passed,
Mhm.
came close.
The lar-
154.
No, 154, no.
Or- Well, it didn't pass, and then they came back with the greatly reduced one,
Mhm.
which had elements of that one. And those didn't pass either. Right.
Okay, so the smaller amount, what we had better results. Okay. I assumed that was the reason why, but it was such a drastic change. I was wondering if there was a specific reason. Thank you for answering that.
So,
Swinging for the
in
fences.
elementary school, now, this was so many years ago, in
Right.
elementary school now, we have folks who don't even really want to comment to us when we're talking about OSPI and also contractor types, architects, about what it will cost to build an elementary school or a high school. High schools are definitely in over 100 million. Elementary schools looking at 50 million. So it's pretty significant cost increases.
Could have been a deal back then.
Yes, would have been. Did you have something you wanted to add about that?
The way he explained it was, like, first pitch, you swing your hardest. And that's so you pay for it. So, that's why, like, great for all.
Shoot the moon.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll be coming back to you, have board meetings to update you about the Long Range Facilities Advisory Group. And if any of you have an interest in being one of the board representatives on that, please be letting me know that. and we'll move forward.
Is, this is probably very early on. I'm just not sure if DA Davidson, if they start discussing it, but I do know does have to be discussed prior to determining the amount, but are we looking at, there's a couple different ways at which we could design it. There's like and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the GCCM, which is a way that
Yes.
I know Port Angeles is pursuing, and there's some cost savings. So is that kind of something that'll be looked at from the committee perspective, pros and cons, all that?
Yes.
Okay.
We're expecting that the first meeting will just be sharing what the mission of the group is, introductions, making sure people understand the scope and the length of how much time and service we may be asking. Then we will be having the second session, likely be an education session with DA Davidson regarding bonds and levies. Then we will be moving into having an OSPI session, and our regional coordinator is willing to participate, and he will talk about some of exactly what you're talking about, the different ways that you can tackle how you are designing, bidding, and executing a build.
Okay.
And so we will continue to have this education theme for the first, we're hopeful, 5 sessions, and then we hope to have assessments. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and almost 6:30 on the dot.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So we'll adjourn 6:27. Does that sound right?